Muaz Mustafa serves as Executive Director of the Syrian Emergency Task Force, which was founded in 2011 in response to the Assad regime and its allies' attacks on innocent Syrian civilians. Today, the Syrian Emergency Task Force supports the Syrian people and the Syrian opposition through advocacy, humanitarian initiatives, and the pursuit of justice and accountability for war crimes. Muaz's work to expose and document war crimes, hold human rights abusers accountable, and to help survivors rebuild their lives brings hope to some of the most desperate places in the world. Receiving the 2023 James W. Foley Legacy Foundation Humanitarian Award is the inspirational Muaz Mustafa.
When I first met Muaz, it was clear that I was meeting, yes, a person, but really someone who was just an absolute force of nature.
It's quite easy to describe Muaz, actually. All heart and all passion.
One of those human beings that has unending energy for others, where where the well that he's coming from is so selfless.
He's able to move mountains, and he's able to do things that nobody is able to do.
Muaz is the definition, I'm sure he's somewhere in the Webster's Dictionary, for being an advocate and a humanitarian.
So in 2011, Muaz joined as the executive director of the Syrian Emergency Task Force. They have managed to galvanize international attention, policy action in a way that is pretty unheard of.
He's coming from the purest of places out of love for the people of Syria.
I first met Muaz through his advocacy for the Wisdom House. The Wisdom House is a safe place for families in Idlib province in Syria to help kids continue to learn, make sure that they have the health care they need in the face of Assad's tragic terrorism in his own country that's causing millions to be displaced.
Caesar was a military photographer in Damascus when the war began. He eventually, after risking his life more than once, was able to smuggle almost 55,000 images out of Syria, documenting the horrors of the Assad regime. And it would never have happened without Muaz's help.
This earthquake in Syria caused Muaz immediately, he's on a plane and he goes to Syria and is bringing light to it and bringing the world's attention to it and assessing the situation and telling the people there they're not forgotten.
I believe Muaz Mustafa is deserving of the James Foley Foundation Humanitarian Award because he reminds all of us through his words and his work every day that one person can make a difference, and also to never lose hope. Thank you, Muaz.
Welcome to the stage, Muaz Mustafa.
Please sit down. I am beyond humbled. I can't thank you enough, Diane, in the Foley Foundation for this incredible honor. And I really want to say that, if it wasn't for the people sitting at this table and my father over there, as well at the other table, I wouldn't be able to do the work that I'm doing. I'm proud to have our board members from the Syrian Emergency Task Force and our staff being here. They're the ones that really deserve the credit. I'm more like Governor Richardson. I get too much credit, and these are the guys that do the good work. And Dr. Bhavna Shyamalan, M. Night Shyamalan, and Salika Shyamalan of the M. Night Shyamalan Foundation. We're a small organization. There are so many times that this family and this foundation, if you don't know about the M. Night Shyamalan Foundation, please learn more, has come in and helped us literally just continue to survive, even when we've run out of money in the bank or needed the advice on how to pursue something. And I wanted to just tell you a little bit about this earthquake, because because after the earthquake, we were there quite a few times directly after the earthquake in Syria. And I want to describe to you the scene that we saw there and what these resilient people, already displaced by Iran, Russia, and the Assad regime, already victims of chemical weapons and torture and bombardment. It was a hellscape. The worst earthquake in the history of Syria and Turkey, between almost 100,000 between southern Turkey and northwest Syria had died. But in Syria, there was no help. There were no rescue teams. The United Nations had not mobilized, not even for assessments of what was happening. There were people, including little kids, elderly grandmothers, sitting on the top of the rubble of their buildings, hearing their loved ones under. I cannot imagine hearing my own family. Imagine hearing your mother or your father under the rubble. Imagine hearing them call for help. So you dig frantically with your hands, with a shovel, whatever you have, your neighbors around you, whoever tries to help. And you can't do anything because you're a little kid, so you can't move a boulder that's thousands of pounds. You can't move this rubble to save someone. You hear them for hours, and then for a whole day and a night, and then for multiple days, and then you hear those calls become whimpers and slowly die away, and you know that your loved one is gone. Now that's a tragedy based initially on a natural disaster, but a lot of these people didn't have to die. And what if I told you that less than 6 miles away, about 5 miles away, was the heavy machinery that was able to save that little kid's mother, or the family members that all died in groups while one of their loved ones who had survived by being on the top floor listened to them and dug frantically but couldn't help them. And the reason for that was that the Assad regime hadn't even declared, because these are liberated, non-regime controlled areas of Syria, hadn't even declared it a national emergency, and that the United Nations decided that the Assad regime was not in actual control of these borders, was the final say in allowing this life-saving aid to just cross a few kilometers across an imaginary line to help these people. So I needed your son. I needed James Foley. We needed people that were brave journalists that were able to cross that road, show that it's fully paved, that it's wide open, that these weren't closed because of the disaster itself, but because the international community and the UN decided that the same person who displaced and besieges these people had the right to say, give them aid or not, as the UN. And it was over, and I'm very proud of my organization, the Syrian Emergency Task Force, brought over 25 journalist outlets into Syria, including the team at PBS NewsHour, including New York Times and the Washington Post, freelancers, European journalists, and 60 Minutes, which recently aired its episode there. And they all did it in the spirit of James Foley. That's absolutely. And it is people that have, through their work, lived up to the legacy of James Foley. These amazing journalists, some of them are here, I see some up there, that go in to these places. And as a result of that, the world learned the truth. It learned that it was the Assad regime preventing aid, Russia and Iran preventing aid to these victims, not this Western sanctions or something else. And through that, we were able to bring more aid, and that whole situation changed. And that's what I, with everything I work on Syria for the last 12 years, I always think of James Foley, frankly, because I've had the honor of working with you, Diane, and I've seen what you've done, how much you've cared in that way. And it's people like James that have helped give what little hope exists for these people, like the people of Syria. Our organization has worked in Syria for the last 12 years. We have School for Orphans and Women's Center, no-cost pharmacy. We do humanitarian work. We also do policy advocacy like the Caesar Act and other acts, the Captagon Act and so on, focused on saving civilians. But we also work on documenting the war crimes and work on pursuing civil, criminal prosecutions against the Assad regime for these war crimes. And one important part of that, and one thing that really does take moral courage, is what happens when they don't bring our loved ones, when they don't let our American brothers and sisters come back home. What do we do then? And then accountability is key. And what you've done took moral courage. The ability to go after the people and put them in front of a court of justice and be able to achieve that, that is a massive achievement. And that is something... And that is something that we all need to think about. Whenever they don't come home, what do we do then? And I want to say, the leadership of the Justice Department, Leila Shweikani mentioned here a young American who was taken by the Assad regime. She's a humanitarian worker, born and raised in Chicago, tortured by the Assad regime with the full knowledge of Iran and Russia, and executed. It is the criminal investigation that has been featured in the New York Times that is pursuing. It takes moral courage to make sure that we follow all the way through and put out indictments for the people that tortured this American girl. The Assad regime has killed 1 million people alongside Russia, which has been its air force, and Iran, which has been its ground force. And Ukraine wouldn't be where it is today had we not kind of turned a blind eye to what Russia has done in Syria and other places. 14 million have been displaced in Syria. That's over half the population of 23 million. And hundreds of thousands of Syrians remain in prisons where they are tortured to death and then buried in mass graves or burned in crematoriums. Yes, this happens today, not in the 40s, not in 94, this is happening now. And Iran and Russia and the Assad regime are playing a role in that. But along these hundreds of thousands of Syrians, there are also many Americans. Austin Tice and Mesh Kamal Maz, whose family is here and fights every day for them. We must do all we can to bring them home. There are other Americans, way too many, but they have not been public, that also need to come home, and we need to do everything to help them do that. I want to say it's also really important to do all you can to continue your support of the Foley Foundation. We have gotten to work with them at the Syrian Emergency Task Force because we have Americans that have been killed in Syria, Americans that have been released, and we're pursuing civil action for them, like Sam Goodwin, who's also joining us here today. And there are Americans that remain there that we want to bring home. And what I have seen the Foley Foundation do, from the codification of things like the Special Presidential Envoy for Hostage Affairs Office and the Hostage Recovery Fusion Cell through the Levinson Act, but also proud to have worked with them on the task force in Congress that now a bipartisan place where Republicans and Democrats work together to help their constituents and others that are not. But the most powerful thing that I've seen is Diane's love, and love has been a theme throughout tonight. Diane's love and caring about these different families. I've seen how she looks at them like their loved ones is her own son, and the way that she cares about them, not just helping them navigate this complex and confusing world where they're trying to get their loved ones home, but truly showing them that she is part of their family. And that has been truly inspiring. Your moral courage and your relentlessness is truly humbling, Diane. Thank you for this. And we've been here for a very long time, so I'm just going to end my speech, but I want to say two things. My father, who just came from Turkey delivering aid, and before that took the gravedigger and a guy who just testified before Congress about mass graves to his home. Thank you for all your work and everything, standing by me all the time. That's the best. And my mother, who anything good that I've ever achieved, anything good about me that anyone's ever seen, it is just Mom. So thank you, Mama, for everything. Thank you, Diane. Thank you all.